Hello everyone and welcome to Mailing Targeting in ActionKit. I'm Shannon Turner, a senior software engineer with ActionKit, and let's go ahead and get started. This is our agenda for the training. We're going to go through all of the targeting options one by one, and even though this is a beginner level training, I want to point out a few things that are just a little bit more advanced, like targeting with reports, merge queries, and merge files, just so you know what they are when you see them. And I'll also link to some other some other trainings that you might find useful as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at each targeting option one by one. In fact, there's so many targeting options here, they do not neatly fit onto a screenshot. And since there are 30 different options here, we're not going to spend a ton of time on each individual one, but of course you can always go back, rewind, and watch it yourself. But I really recommend following along and trying these on your own. I think it's really the best way that you can see how these work for you and for your list. So first up is actions. These will match users who have filled out a form on a page. So you can think of this as taking action on any ActionKit page. Typically that's a petition page or a survey or a sign-up page, maybe a donation page, and importantly, import pages. So this last point about import pages I really want to emphasize because a lot of groups use import pages. If you've uploaded some users to your import pages, those users will typically have an import action on that page. So you can then target these imported users in the exact same way as any other page. So perhaps you have a petition page, and when the user signs, they're now able to be targeted in this way. With the actions targeting option, you can type to search for your desired page. Anyone who took action on this page, aka anyone who signed this petition, they will receive this mailing. Let's set up another quick petition. Now I've added a second page to my actions targeting. This will now target to users who have signed one or both of these petitions. And if we added my No Kings Rally signups import page from a few slides ago, anyone who took action on any of these three pages would be matched. So we're going to see this pattern throughout targeting. Anytime you can have one or multiple options within a single targeting type, for example, multiple actions or multiple tags or multiple user groups, you'll be saying if someone has an action on any of these pages, or someone has any of these tags, or is in any of these user groups, I want to match them. Custom action fields allow you to target users based on how they answered a specific question on a page in a specific way. So for example, let's say I have this survey question here on a page of mine. On the edit content screen, here's what that would look like. And let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit on that custom action field. So here you can see what the label is, here's how it's being saved in the database, and then what the values are and what gets displayed. And we saw a couple slides ago that that was a radio button, a set of radio buttons. So here we can see that when a user takes action on that survey page, how they answer that question is recorded in their action history. As we can see here, this user answered ICE as their most important issue. And when we want to target based on this, we can use the custom action field option, and we can type to search for the specific page that we want, or we can just skip ahead and type to search for the field that we're looking for. Here, this one is called most important issue. Notice that it has to match what appears here in these action fields. And then the value also needs to match what we're looking for here. So in this case, that's ICE. Once we've added those in and clicked add action field, that's going to get added, and here's what this looks like. This mailing will now target to anyone who said ICE was their most important issue. The donors targeting option is meant to be pretty easy to use. If you want to target to anyone who has donated ever, then just check the box and you're done. If you want to limit to some subset of monthly donors, you can choose one of the options from the monthly donors type to search field here. If you choose one of these options, it doesn't really matter if you check this box or not, because a user can't be a monthly donor if they've never donated. So here's all of these options all together. These last few options here are particularly useful if a user was a recurring donor, but let's say their credit card is about to expire, and you can send them an email asking them to make sure that they update their expiration date. Or, hey, your card did expire last month. Could you update your card, please? Your donation really helps us do our work in these specific ways. Next up is event campaigns. And first, let's start on the event campaign dashboard before we look at how we're going to target this in our mailing. So here I have a distributed event campaign with all of the No Kings rallies happening very soon. And in case you're wondering how I made these 300 events here, then some of the ways that we can do this is by adding in, uploading your events into ActionKit with a spreadsheet. You can sync events from Mobilize. You can allow your users to host, also known as creating events, or you can create these events one by one. There's lots of different ways to add that. Once you've got your events in though, we move on to the targeting portion. So here we'll first choose the event campaign with all of our No Kings events. Then we can choose the radius around each event that we want to recruit for. So here I've chosen 20 miles, but we support a radius as small as 1 mile and as large as 200 miles. So if you like, you can limit this to users in the same county, the same state, or same district, regardless of the radius. Other options include being able to restrict by the date. Maybe you don't need to do that in this particular case, but that might make sense if it was something that was happening every day or every weekend, like for instance the Tesla takedown events in early 2025. Finally, event fields can be useful if you define them on your events themselves. This is a little bit more advanced, but here's an example. Maybe you created events with different types within the same campaign. So for example, this is a phone banking event, but we also have debate watch parties and we have canvassing and so on. And so you could set the action fields on each event and then match for those types here. Languages look very straightforward, but they're a little bit tricky. A user gets a language when they take action on a page. So this targeting will target to all users who have English as their language. However, you don't have to set language on your pages. So you might not have any language associated with your pages at all. In this example, even though my title here and presumably my content that we don't see on this screen is written in English, this page does not have a language set. So if a user takes action on this page, they don't get a language unless they already have one. So if I'm a new user and I sign this petition and this is the only action I've taken, I don't have a language. So here are some limitations to languages that are important to keep in mind if you're using them for targeting. Users only have a single language in ActionKit. Users only gain a language in ActionKit by taking action on a page that's set to that language. And we don't really have the concept of being bilingual in ActionKit. They're going to have the language of the last page that they took action on that had a language set. And if a page doesn't have a language set, it's not going to change an existing user's language. But if a user has only taken action on pages that don't have language set, they might not have any language at all. So these are some limitations to keep in mind. But the main thing to remember is that once a user's language is set, their language is set, and it won't change unless they've taken action on a page with a different language. Now, it's totally fine to use languages in your targeting. I think it's especially useful when you're campaigning in multiple languages, just as you might do if you have an ICE out of your cities action. But it's really important to keep this limitation in mind. Next up is lists, and this refers to your mailing list, which is the default grouping of users. In years past, it was more common to have lots of different mailing lists, and certainly some clients still do everything by mailing lists, and that's totally fine. By default, you have the main email list and the re-engagement list. Maybe you've also created a get fewer emails list or something similar. And you can add new mailings list on the mailings tab if you go to data and then mailing lists. If you're wondering how a user gets added to a list, that's done by taking action on a page. And which list they get added to is entirely up to you. If you go to the Action Basics, scroll down to Advanced Options, and choose an email list from this drop-down menu, you'll be able to change which one you want here. So anyone taking action on this page gets subscribed to this main email list. So a really common setup is to include the main email list, but to exclude the re-engagement list, because you typically won't send your main mailings to users who are disengaged. Next up is mailings, and this is a way that you can include all of the recipients of a specific mailing, or those who are still subscribed anyways. Maybe your first thought would be for wanting to send a mailing to someone who's received some first mailing, like this one, would be to fix a broken link in the original, but usually that's not necessary. From the Mailings tab, if you go to Short Links under Content and then find the link that's included in your mailing, you can update it here by clicking Edit. There's no need to send out a second mailing with a correction. Now, on the other hand, excluding mailings, this is a little bit more common. It's also a little bit more complex because we add a checkbox asking whether you want to also exclude sent mailings that excluded this mailing. This is usually what you want, and if you click here, you can find more in the documentation. For recurring mailing series, most commonly, you'll use this in your excludes in order to ensure that a user doesn't receive the same welcome series twice, for example. And so here, if we have it time limited to all messages in series, and then click add, it'll change to this. And this is what it looks like to use the all messages in series, aka all time. In other words, once someone has received this welcome series recurring mailing, they will never get it again. Now, in some situations, it might make sense to say, well, a user might be eligible for this recurring series sometime in the future. So here we're saying with the time limited, we want to say this user can't get the same welcome series twice in a 30-day period, maybe 30, 60, 90, up to you. But if a user unsubscribes and then maybe resubscribes sometime later, they could then get this welcome series once again. And here's what it looks like once you've clicked through. Next up is Score Pool, and this was one of 2025's 10 features every client should use. This is a scoring system that looks at anonymized user data from participating opted-in ActionKit clients to determine how likely a user is to interact with a mailing in the next 30 days. We assign every user a score from 0, which is the worst, to 100, which is the best, but then we cap those scores at 50. We recommend that everyone uses ScorePool because in addition to the scores, you'll also see much lower hard bounces since we'll automatically unsubscribe undeliverable addresses that are seen in other ActionKit clients. Next up is tags, and if you're not tagging your pages right now, you should be. They're a great way of categorizing your users. I have a blog post linked here about tagging your pages and why it's never too late to get started. So here, I don't have to keep a running track of every page that's about ICE if I want to send my users an email about defunding and abolishing ICE. I can use this tag that I've created and applied to every one of my pages. And since we apply tags retroactively, if you have old pages that you want to tag, this still works. User groups are very similar to tags. We added user groups a few years ago after many clients asked, can I give someone a tag without them taking action? And can I take a tag away from someone? The answer to those questions were yes, kind of, but it's complicated and there are some side effects. So user groups help to fill that gap. And many newer ActionKit clients use user groups exclusively instead of tags. Others use both tags and user groups simultaneously. There's no right or wrong answer. They're both very useful tools to have in your toolbox, and this link will go to a video for more about both tags and user groups. Activity level by mailbox provider allows you to target to users who have opened or clicked within a certain time frame. And we offer sensible options like 30-day openers clickers and 90-day openers and clickers. You can customize the timeframes as you like, and you can even do it by mailbox provider. So for example, maybe Microsoft is being very strict, so you target to 30-day openers and clickers at Microsoft, but 90 days everywhere else. And just a quick heads up, do not use the activity by level by mailbox provider in your excludes. It doesn't work the way that a lot of folks expect, and we're actually going to be removing the option to use it in your excludes in a future version. Next up is city and postcode radius. This is pretty straightforward. If you are just using a US zip code, you can put the zip just on its own and choose your radius. If you're using a US city, you can include the state to differentiate it from other cities by the same name in other states. But in either case, you'll just choose the radius around those points. I also really want to point out this faint blue underlining. It's kind of hard to see, but if you hover your mouse over it, you'll see this very, very helpful tooltip explaining more about how to use this. Lots of targeting options have this tooltip, and if you were paying extra close attention, you might have seen it on a few other targeting options that we had covered in previous slides. But I especially wanted to point it out for all of these location options because even though they're fairly straightforward, there is some nuance here that's worth considering. So for example, this says that the search radius happens from the city center, not the borders. So if you wanted to search Los Angeles here, just keep in mind that that is going to happen from the geographical center point of Los Angeles and not all of the borders. For congressional district, this concept is pretty straightforward, but oh geez, what's the right format to use to target the districts that I want? Here again, the tooltip is going to help us out. So you'll use the 2-letter state abbreviation followed by an underscore, followed by this 2-digit district code. And if you have more than one that you'd like to use, you can separate it with a semicolon or with line breaks. You don't have to remember these. You can hover over to see the tooltip. Just like with other options around location, I might be wondering what is the correct format to use for countries. To target users in the United States, should I say US, USA, United States of America? Well, you do want United States here, but don't take my word for it. Go to the Reports tab and create a users type report. Then set country as your first column and the number of users as your second column, and then run your report. Here I'm also sorting the number of users by descending so that my report will show me the country with the most users first. And this works for anything. It's not just country. You can use it for zip code, congressional district, on and on and on. And it's really helpful to see which options you have in your database, which you'll then want to use when you're typing in which country options you want. So next up is State House and State Senate. This looks very similar to US House, but it has an extra digit. And remember, you can double check with your report, and you can always refer back to the tooltip for help. For states, you'll want to use the abbreviation, but consult the tooltip. Don't have to memorize it. And you can see there's some examples here as well. If you want to target to non-US regions instead of states, you can click this little link right here, and then that's going to convert states into regions. Then you can put your region in. So Ile-de-France is the region where Paris is located. So let's go ahead and put that. And then when I go to save my targeting, oh no, I get an error message. So no worries if we don't understand what this error message is supposed to be. I think we could do better and make this clearer. So I'm actually going to file a bug report. If you ever see an error message that you don't understand, you're like, what's going on here? Please file a bug report in support and ask, hey, what's this error message all about? Because we should make those error messages much, much clearer. But until we fix this, let's take a look at the tooltip here to see why we got this error message in the first place. So the tooltip says I need to include the country as well. So now I add the country with a little comma also, and then when I save, it actually works. Next up is target groups, and this allows you to use a predefined group like the US House or US Senate, or one that you've created, like for instance, all House Democrats or other custom targets. Now this will include the constituents of that group and not the targets themselves, but don't take my word for it. Try it yourself. For example, if this targeted to the targets themselves, the senators, I'd expect to get exactly 100 users. Next up is boundaries and groups. So this colorful mess here is the school districts of Washington State. And many local governments make these shapes available to download in a standard format for a variety of administrative divisions, like here with the school districts, but there's so many ones that you'll be able to download and then re-upload into ActionKit in order to do your targeting. So you can find a lot of these on state websites, on city websites, and so on. If you wanted to match everybody in this list, you would go to the boundary groups option and then choose the full set of boundary groups that you have here, which this is the Washington school districts. And if you were to click on the map, you could narrow in on a single boundary in that boundary group. This one is the Seattle Public Schools District. And if you wanted to just match a single geometry or a couple of geometries instead of the entire group, no problem. You can add this one here using the boundaries instead of the boundary group targeting option. And if you're wondering where to create these boundaries or where you can upload the shapefiles, go to the Pages tab, and in the sidebar menu, go to Targets and then go to Custom Boundaries. Next up are U.S. counties, and these are pretty straightforward, but mind the tooltip text here. Don't use the word county, so it would be Marin, California, not Marin County, California. And although it's not strictly required, I'd really strongly suggest that you include the state as well, because a lot of states have the same county names as other states. Next up are divisions, and these are non-US political divisions like a riding or a province or a district. So think of these as the congressional districts of other countries. We currently have Canada and Great Britain available. This next one we're going to spend a lot of time on. This is the query library targeting option. This one is going to be used when you have a report and you want to use the results of that report to target your mailing. An action kit comes standard with a lot of reports that you can use for targeting right away. So go to the Reports tab, go to Browse All, and then choose the Mailer category. And here's an example. If you wanted to exclude last month's donors from your current fundraising asks, you could do so really easily with this report. Here are some other examples. Maybe you want all of the users who are subscribed by a specific page, whether that's an import page or a really popular petition. Maybe you want all of the users who were added to your database within the last certain number of days, or even the users who donated within a last certain number of days. Here's some more built-in reports that I think are really, really useful. You could get users who clicked on a specific mailing. You could target to users who opened a mailing. Just keep in mind that opens are always an undercount, especially since Apple's release of their mail privacy protection program back in 2021. But it was an undercount before then as well. Remember that Outlook and many other email clients don't always show the images by default. And of course, an image, when that gets loaded, that's actually how we track when a mailing gets opened. And so for another example, maybe you want to know users who are new to database exactly this many days ago. This is really commonly used for targeting with a mailing series, for instance. And since I can't resist, here's a few more built-in reports. All of these reports, come standard with Action Kit, and which I think are all super useful. We have attendees and hosts of upcoming events. And on that last slide, if you were thinking it would be really useful to target to users who clicked on a mailing, we have a version for users who clicked but didn't take action. So this would be really perfect for remarketing emails. And if you're looking at these two reports here and you're wondering, Shannon, what does an upcoming event mean in this context? We can go ahead and click Edit on either of these reports. And in some cases, the report will use the query builder. In other cases like this one, you may need to read a bit of custom SQL. This says that the attendees of upcoming events report, this defines upcoming as an event that starts within the next 10 hours. So you can always edit that to make it your own if you have a different definition for what upcoming means to you and your organization. Maybe you would prefer to recruit, 24 hours in advance or 48 hours in advance, just as a for example. And if you're wondering why I'm spending so much time on the query library, especially relative to other sections, this is because the query library is one of the most powerful features in all of ActionKit. You really have so much flexibility and power here. You can target to anybody. If you can make a report for it, you can target your mailing with it, and that's huge. And you don't have to start from zero. You can copy a built-in report and make some changes. Or you can use the query builder to get started. There's a video linked here which will go into more detail about how to use the query builder. And you can also write custom SQL if you'd prefer. Now you can have other display columns besides user ID. This can be really helpful to have other display columns when you're trying to check your work and make sure you're getting the results you expected. But you absolutely must have user ID as your column in order to use this report in your targeting. Of course, you can have whatever filter criteria you like, but you also must make sure that you save your report with the mailer category. One last thing before we move on from reports. Caching is great. In fact, I spent a lot of time during this year's 10 features every client should use presentation talking about caching, talking about how it's useful. But a quick summary of that is it's generally best to refresh daily to keep your mailings building super fast, and you can schedule the daily rebuild time for a time that's convenient for you and your team. But if you're using this report to target to a recurring mailing, you'll usually want to refresh every time. Now, all of that was showing how to find or create reports that you can use for targeting with the query library. But we haven't actually added this to our targeting yet. So now we're back on the targeting screen for our mailings, and let's actually add this to our targeting. We choose the query library option, and then we see here we have a type to search field with lots of different reports, all of which had the mailer report category. So here, now we can type to search or scroll in and find all of the reports that we might want to use. Here I'm going to choose click on page but no action. And again, remember if you don't see your query here, it has to have the mailer category. And if you just added it, you might need to refresh this targeting page. Some reports, like the click on page but no action, this allows you to specify different options when you run them. So for instance, if you want to click on a specific page but no action, well, you have to know which page a user was sent a mailing about. And in order to know that, oh, they clicked on this page from a mailing, but they didn't follow through, right? So here we're going to choose which page we care about. It doesn't have to be predefined in my report. And so here's what it looks like once we've added the report that we want to target by. Let's add in another example. So here I've added another report called volunteers who've clicked in the last X days. This is a custom report I've made, and here I'm going to say if you're a volunteer who has clicked within the last 30 days, I want you to get this email. Once I've added the second query from the query library, here's what this looks like. Now remember, when we talked about actions, if you include multiple options here, then a user who matches any of these options will be part of your targeting. So in other words, if a user matches either of these reports, they'll be included. During this year's 10 features every client should use, I pointed out this checkbox that appears. because it solves a lot of problems that clients have asked about on support over the years. If you check this box, it says only include users who match all of the queries in this list. So in other words, in this example, both of these, right? It's the intersection of both of these reports. We added this checkbox because we used to get a lot of questions into support saying, hey Shannon, I have these two reports. How can I target to users who match both of them? What's the intersection of these two reports? And the answer used to be, I'm so sorry, you have to make a third report that contains all of the criteria from these two reports and, matches all of that. But you don't have to do that anymore. You can just leave the reports as is and check this box. So this checkbox can be super useful. But I do want to be super duper clear. It is totally fine to leave this box unchecked. Oftentimes that's what you want. If you want to match either one, great, leave this unchecked. If you want to match the intersection of these two reports though, then go ahead and check the box. Next up is raw queries. This allows you to write custom SQL and use it right in your targeting for your mailing. Now this is really useful in very limited circumstances, but honestly, if you're ever planning on using this SQL ever again some other time, it's probably a better idea to save that SQL as a report. Next up is the users targeting option, and this allows you to target users based on their user IDs. Generally, this is best used for one-offs or if you're testing something with your user ID. My general rule is if you're using more user IDs than you have memorized, then you're probably better off using a different means of targeting. Next up is custom user fields, and this is very similar to custom action fields in that they can save data from a form. But more commonly, this is data that you've imported, usually from some other source, or you've generated this with a report in ActionKit to then re-import into ActionKit, or used in a user updater in order to keep your custom user fields up to date. So here, just like with the custom action fields, you'll have a type to search field where you can look for the custom user fields that you have defined. And in this example, I'm going to search for everyone who has a PayPal account. This is one of those built-in ActionKit fields. Now, if you attended the payments training or if you watched that video, you'll know that the AK Payments has PayPal field. This can be used to send PayPal one-click links to users so that they can donate super easily by PayPal. This is all you have to do targeting-wise to get these users, and best of all, it's already set up for you in your ActionKit. Next up is merge queries, and the way I like to think about merge queries is that they are basically the same as mailer queries, which we spent an awful lot of time at in the query library section, except merge queries can also be used as personalization snippets in your mailings as well. So in other words, if you create a report for it, you can use it for your targeting and your mailings content personalization. The main difference is instead of the mailer report category, you're going to use the merge report category. And when you're creating your merge query report, again, you have to use user ID or some other way of saying this represents all of these users, but user ID is definitely the most commonly used for a merge query. You could use other location, but I would say that for most merge queries, user ID is the most common. Next up are what personalization you want to actually use. That's going to be the rest of your display columns. And so here I have the amount of the first one-time payment this user has made, the amount of the most recent one-time payment this user has made, and then the amount of the highest one-time payment this user has made. These orange boxes here are the column names of your report when you run it. When you're using the query builder, we will automatically generate reasonable-ish column names, but you should probably rename these so that they're a little more sensible. And so you can do that by clicking inside of one of these boxes and then giving them a new name. And the reason for that is when you're using your merge queries personalization snippets in your mailing, here we've already added in the merge query to our mailing. We go to the snippets menu, we go to merge query. These here, these column names are actually going to be what comes here for the snippets. Now, there's nothing wrong necessarily with leaving them as is. It might just be a little bit harder to follow what payment highest single cur means. So having sensible names for your columns will make your snippets and then your mailing much easier to understand. I think something like highest one-time donation would be a little bit better here. So this next point trips up a lot of people, so I really wanted to call it out. When you're using a merge query, you're going to add that on the compose screen, but a new targeting option here appears on the targeting screen. Typically, you want to check this box. That's almost always the case, because when you do, this will target to users who are matched by your merge query. This is really easy to forget because you add the merge query on the compose screen, but you set that targeting option on the targeting screen. Next up are merge files. Now, merge queries and merge files are very similar. You can use them in your mailing's targeting and to personalize your mailing content. Now, the main difference is that the data for merge queries comes from an ActionKit report, whereas the data for merge files comes from a spreadsheet that you upload. And you're going to use merge files when you want to personalize mailing content with data from some other source. When I was working for an ActionKit client back in 2017, and Republicans were trying to kill the Affordable Care Act, we used merge files to target to users in key districts of vulnerable House members and key states for senators. This let us personalize our mailings with facts like, here's how many people in this district or this state who would lose their health insurance. And our members used those figures as talking points when making phone calls and showing up to district offices. So linked here is last year's training on personalizing mailing content, which goes way more in depth on how to set up merge files for your targeting. Next up, we're going to look at how these different targeting options interact. Because so far, we've only really talked about how targeting options combine within a single option. So we probably remember from earlier that if a user has either the tag climate change or the tag Green New Deal, they'll be included in this targeting. But how do these other targeting options factor in here? Since this is our mailing includes, imagine that there's a big and in between each of these options. So a user has to have this PayPal account and be in the volunteers user group and have one of these tags. You could have both, but you just need one of them. Another way to think about it is imagine a checklist. And if a user matches all of your criteria, then they're included. So if you answer yes to all of the above, you are included in this targeting. Excludes, on the other hand, works very, very differently. If a user matches even a single one of your exclusion criteria, they will not get this mailing. So this mailing excludes anyone who is on the re-engagement list and anyone who has a score pool score of 20 or lower. In other words, imagine an or between each option in your excludes. Let's use that checklist example again. For each user in your excludes, they're filling out this checklist, and one single check mark disqualifies you from receiving this mailing. Let's look at one more example before moving on. Here I'm setting up my includes. I'm choosing the query library because I want to use the host of upcoming events for my No Kings rallies. And then I can add in the attendees of the same events as well. So now this will target users who are either a host or an attendee of one of my upcoming No Kings events. But hey, what does this button do? Also include another set of users. If we click that, it's going to add a new section of includes that we can see here. And from there, we can add a whole other set of criteria. So here, in this example, this mailing will be sent to my hosts and my attendees, as well as anyone who lives within 30 miles of one of these No Kings events, whether they've already registered to be a host or an attendee or not. Next up is the limits and ordering section. This is towards the bottom of the targeting screen. Limit allows you to say, I don't care how many people this targeting would match. This mailing can only go to a maximum, a limit of this many people. And you can use a comma in this field to make it easier to count how many zeros you have. In other words, a limit sets the ceiling. If your mailing would target to fewer people, your limit's not going to do anything. But if your mailing could target to more people, it will stop. And if your mailing had a limit and you're testing multiple subject lines, you can use the automatic subject line testing feature, which I really like. If you want more about automatic subject line testing, make sure you check out Simon's training on A/B testing, which goes into more detail about it. Next up is ordering. Now, if you're doing a random sample test, you're probably going to want to shuffle randomly. And that's true for a lot of mailings, but if you order by engagement level, this can sort users in order of their score pool score. Sometimes that can be helpful if you're sending a full base mailing, especially if you're using the max emails per second feature. Just make sure that you're not ordering by engagement level if you're doing a random sample test. And on the subject of the max emails per second, ActionKit is really fast. Some senders can send thousands of emails per second, and some mailbox providers think that's a little bit too fast. So if you're seeing the bounce delay metrics screen, let's click on this highlighted link, and here we can see, oh, we have been delayed by Comcast. We see this little throttled. So if you see the reason for your delay is throttled or something similar, then the max emails per second feature may be able to help you a little bit. Although it sounds kind of silly, rate limiting yourself with max emails per second, this is almost always better for your deliverability than getting rate limited by the mailbox provider. And if you click this, this is going to let you see the documentation on this. So there's no magic number to how fast or slow you should go. If you're not seeing delays, don't worry about it. And if you are seeing throttling, this may help you. I like to recommend going as slow as makes sense for the size of your audience and the timeliness of your messages, right? So if you have 33 minutes to spare and it doesn't matter too much, if this message will still reach your audience, in a reasonable time, then this is fine. But if you're not seeing delays, don't worry about the max emails per second. So now this is at the end. This is where you'll be able to find all of the slides for all of the presentations for ClientCon 2026. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed.